Hi, my name is Danielle Cooper, and I'm a senior studying business management and leadership at UNSW. And one of the questions that I have you been a believer most of your life, or did you become a believer after you started teaching? And if you did become a believer after you started teaching as a professor, how did that impact the way that you taught?
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to Meet the Prof. I am Shane Hartley. My friend Spence Hackney and I have been receiving questions from college students, and then we ask them to Christian professors. And we're having a blast in the meantime of doing it. And our mission is really simple. We want to encourage Christ-centered conversations on the college campus, and in this case, between students and professors. So welcome. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you for joining us. That means a lot to us that you would listen in now. And we have a privilege of hearing from Len Lecci here. So Spence and I interviewed Dr. Len Lecci, who's a professor of psychology at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. So Len's research is very interesting. Part of his research involves detection of early memory loss. Another part of his research involves looking at the bias that's involved in different jury decisions. And also, Len was just recently awarded a little over $149,000 for brain injury research. He's also a lot of fun to be with, and I think you're going to enjoy hearing some of his story about how God has worked in his life. You might not be surprised. A big part of his spiritual journey has been a rational and well thought out journey. And I think you're going to enjoy hearing about the role of doubt in having healthy growth. Also about dating. He talks about building trust in dating relationships. So before we get started, please remember to click on to subscribe or follow this podcast, and that helps get the word out to even more college students. And so without any further ado, enjoy our conversation with Dr. Len Lecci. Well, Len, welcome to Meet the Prof. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to get the time with you. And so I've known you for a while, but I learned something about you when I read your profile on meettheprof.com. You said that if you weren't a professor, that you would be a lawyer. So tell us about that. What kind of lawyer would you have been?
That's a great question. I don't know if I had gotten that far into it. I was an undergraduate at the time, had not planned on going into psychology. I was doing my undergrad, and then I was going to apply to law school. I think I was thinking of criminal trial lawyer. That was kind of vaguely my thought. And I used to, and I guess in some ways still do, kind of think in a very specific legalistic way, which has been helpful in some things and not so much in others.
What's an example of that? How do you think that way?
Well, I mean, I can distinctly remember one instance where I was in a class. It was actually a psychology class, and I think it was a biopsych class, and we were going through test questions. And there was a question that I thought was not appropriately worded, or at least worded such that the correct answer was not the answer the professor said was the correct answer. And so I put my hand up and I asked a couple of questions. And when he said yes to those questions, I said, well, given that, then if you look at this question, and as soon as I asked him in front of the whole class, he went, you should go to law school. And I had already that had been on my mind. And it wasn't until I was a senior that I sort of fell in love with a psychology class. And a professor in that class kind of asked me, he said, why don't you read some grants that I've submitted? And I did. And I really just got interested in that. It wasn't so much I lost interest in the other stuff. I just got more interested in that. So I never made it to law school. I just applied to grad school in psych instead. So
So have you seen a TV show called Bull, where he is a psychologist that he chooses juries based on psychology? You should watch it, because you're like the modern day Jason Bull. You would be good at it.
Well, interestingly, and one of the great things about being a professor is you can choose your area of research interests. And so one of our areas of interest in our lab is juror bias. And so we actually study it. We've developed a scale to measure it. And so we do actually some forensic work. I've done some consulting and such. So I have had the advantage of being able to still satisfy that interest, which I will say is probably one of my favorite things about being in academia is, whatever your research interests are, you can pursue them. As long as they're productive and they, result in publications or grants or whatever the case may be, you can choose your area of research pretty openly. And so I've been able to sort of cultivate that interest over the years. And it's been fun. It's kind of a little side foray gig, if you will, that has been fun for me to stoke that alive. I probably have dreams every now and then of being in a courtroom or something.
Yeah. Well, Len, so when you were a college student, what is the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you?
So I can distinctly remember, I'm sure you guys look like you're probably about my age, that we've gone through some fashion revolutions over the years. So you might remember the 1970s. So my story associated with that is we didn't have a ton of money in our home, and my parents were pretty frugal. My mom was a great seamstress. So I have a sister who's 6 years older than me. I got her hand-me-down clothes. So somewhere around the early 1980s, I was wearing my sister's hand-me-down bell-bottom pants, massive flares and everything. I remember being incredibly self-conscious at that moment. And what dawned on me since that time is I was thinking, where was my head like in the years preceding that? Because I was still wearing those clothes. But I guess at some point, whatever my age was, I know I was in high school, and I just all of a sudden thought, this is it. I'm not wearing women's clothes. Hand me down.
I was wondering if you have any pictures of this. Do you have any pictures? You could trust us. We won't share them if you give it to us. We'll just look at it.
I hope not. I really hope not. I was so thankful that social media did not exist at that time.
Yeah. So I think we need to make a PSA that Len has decided to quit wearing women's clothes, and we're all very proud of him. Congratulations.
Well,
this now gets out on social media. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome.
I appreciate that.
Well, that'll wrap up our time. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
That's great. We can edit all this out, right?
No, we don't edit at all. We just keep it going. Well, Len, so to be more serious, I was encouraged reading about some of your story online, how you explained that you were raised Catholic, but you didn't begin really owning your Christian faith until you read some books on the reasons for the Christian faith. And I was wondering, tell us about that. Tell us how was that so significant for you?
Sure. So, I certainly, was familiar with the basic tenets of Christianity. I actually attended church with, some regularity. At least a couple, maybe once or twice a month was kind of the going rate. But it did definitely feel more ritualistic rather than more of a sort of a personal journey, if you will. I don't really recall ever questioning my belief or my faith or really any other aspects. Just kind of felt like this is where I was supposed to do and go. The journey was affected by a number of things. We started having kids in 2001, my wife and I. Should say I met Kelly, my wife, and she was definitely more of a active believer, and therefore that also sort of pushed me forward. And then began sort of reading, I guess, what would be broadly referred to as some of the apologetics literature that I hadn't really gotten much into previously. One of the books that sort of stood out to me that I've actually read more than once and was A Case for Christ. And it was interesting because when I first read it, I think I read it maybe with one foot in the door and one foot in skepticism. When I read it again a few years later, I remember, kind of going through it in a less skeptical manner, and in a sense that things made more sense to me at the time. So in my mind, it sort of reflected how my thinking had changed on some of those ideas. Just that being sort of an illustration of it, it really was a bit of a slow boil. I mean, I wouldn't tell you that there was this event occurred and then from there forward it was different. It was kind of a series of things over time. I would say church shifted from a little more obligatory action to something I wanted to do if we missed for one reason or another. We were traveling, actually, it felt like I missed something that week. So those are kind of some of the, I guess, the signposts that things were changing.
Do you remember a learning or realization that sort of took hold of you during that period of discovery you went through?
Yeah, I would think, one of the things that occurred was that if I was to dial back like 10 years before that, I think my base assumption was not to believe and to look for evidence to support belief.
The default was to not believe.
The default was not, and I remember at some point in that process sort of questioning, why is that the default? Why might I not adopt the belief and look and then kind of use information? So, I'll be honest, I remember having that thought in a very, very practical way initially. So basically thinking of it almost as a cost ratio analysis, right? So if it's not true and you believe, what's the cost? If it is true and you don't believe, it'd be a much higher cost. So it probably makes sense to make your default that. And so I remember making it a very rational sort of decision. And then it's sort of evolving over time after that. So it wasn't just the logical choice given the cost benefit trade-off.
I tell you what, you are a natural lawyer. You would be.
Am I?
That. I love it. As you're talking, I'm sitting there thinking how humans seem to always be able to find evidence to support views they already hold.
Yes.
And you said I kind of decided to adopt this view. And it was pretty easy for me to find evidence to support that, which is, you're the expert on the human condition. This is my armchair psychology right here. So you can shoot it down. But
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can pick any topic, and certainly anything where there's enough uncertainty, unknowns about it, it's relatively easy to support one position or the other. So, we're going to have, regardless of where you land, I mean, the most, an atheist or a Christian could sit there and none can truly use the evidence to be 100% certain, which is why you need faith on one hand, but you also need faith to be on the other hand of the argument. It's not like that's a faithless position either.
I'd love to double click on that about faith, because there's so much in the Bible about our need to trust God, step out in faith, and students face a lot of things that are unknown. So there are many opportunities, for fear and anxiety. How for you have you taken any step of faith into an unknown? And what was faith like for you, being someone who is so rational, to step into something where maybe there was no real reason to trust God on the outside?
I guess what I would say is when you experience some doubt, I sometimes hear students talk about, they're experiencing doubt and such. They may have come from an upbringing where that wasn't necessarily tolerated or discussed extensively. You should just, believe. I think actually it's a good sign when people are thinking about doubt, because for one thing, it's a sign that they're kind of grappling with the issue, and that's much better than indifference or even certainty in the other direction. Is that healthy faith has an element of doubt in it. That's what drives the need for faith. So I don't think that's necessarily a problematic sign. I think anybody, even great biblical figures, have, express their doubt in their passages as you read them, and and then they turn it around by the end of the passage. But it's there, and it's there in the next passage. So it's not like it's absent. So I think it's important for us not to see that as a shortcoming or a problem, I think it's a very healthy sign. And as I said, I think it means the person's engaged, that's really all you can ask for, is to be engaged in that, whether it's an open conversation with others or some debate in your own mind.
Yeah, there's been things written about the healthy doubt that we need to have ourselves, encourage others to have too, because sometimes when people have doubts about God, especially growing up, if they grow up in a religious kind of environment, that person can end up feeling guilty for having those doubts. And the remedy is just to stop it, just stop having the doubts. But even you're describing that there is a healthy kind of skepticism, or just a way forward with doubt that doesn't just try to ignore it, but begin to search out. So even search out solutions. Is that what you're saying? Let's search answers for what are doubt.
Yeah, I think questions help, because doubt ultimately is expressed often in the form of questions. Questions kind of help you decide where you should be looking next. So, I mean, that's very essence of of any field that's based on science as well. You're not sure about something, it leads to questions, and you go to the next step. The one thing I will say is, and I do mention this in my classes, there's some things where you really need to have some faith. And often one of the best analogies of this is, if you're in a loving relationship with someone, so your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the case may be, I'm not sure if it's necessarily healthy for you to put that relationship to the scientific scrutiny of, does the person love you? And that usually leads to a pretty unhealthy relationship. You, at some point, after presumably the relationship has demonstrated some stability and you've come to have some confidence in it, you'll have to have some faith in it, or you'll pull your hair out worrying about it. And so that has to kind of at some point make that shift. Does it mean you'd never have doubts? No, not at all. And again, there are the return to ideas of past behavior and love that would reassure you. And I think we can do the same thing with our relationship with Christ. And in fact, many times it's the same things that we rely on that help us through those more difficult times, including speaking to other people who might be having some similar beliefs and even similar doubts.
There's a point in dating where you're expressing doubts about the person, you're asking questions because you're trying to see if you fit, And at some point you cross this marriage boundary and you make this commitment and you're like, I'm going to quit asking those questions to see if you fit, and I'm going to commit. And there's another level of trust. And that's what we do with Christ in a way too. You sort of probe around to figure out if I can trust this guy, if this is all legit. Yeah. You did that. You read some books, and at some point you commit, and you say, no, my life is in this now.
And I guess you could get there in that cost benefit analysis model too, where you say, well, all things we hear, the pros and cons of being with so and so, and that may be part of that process. That may occur at some point, but you're going to go beyond that if you're really committed in a covenant kind of way with someone else. And of course, they use the same term in the Bible of God making a covenant with His people, and so in that regard, that analogy certainly extends there.
Hey, and if my relationship was based on a cost-benefit analysis, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be married because my wife wouldn't have me. Because I'm probably a poor investment.
We both married up.
I would fail. So I'm glad it's not.
We get the benefit.
Yes.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview, and you can learn more as well as read about other Christian professors on our website, meettheprof.com, and you can search for professors by name or by state or even by college campus. And you can also find many helpful resources about questions that were in the interview and other ways of answering tough questions at cru.org, and that's cru.org. And college students, if you would like to ask a question to a professor and potentially be on the show, this is how you do it. Follow us on Instagram. It's Meet the Prof Official. And then upload us a video by direct message where you say your name, your college campus, and what year you are. and then ask your question. And you can ask more than one question, and hopefully then you can be featured on the show. And if you enjoyed this, would you please share this episode with a friend, someone you think it would be helpful to? And please don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast. And if you're listening to this, but you would like to watch the videos of these interviews, we record them all and we put them on YouTube. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Meet the Prof Official. And we would love to meet you there. And lastly, if you would like to financially support our Faculty Commons ministry with Cru, you can do so online by going to give.cru.org/0424344. So thank you for being with us. And until next time, we hope you feel encouraged to have a Christ-centered conversation on your college campus.